Hey friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I have a super sweet and fruity card to share using some scrapbook.com exclusive products. So let's get into how I put this card together. I am going to be using the market bag shape die set, but I will be focusing on the handled bag along with all of these little fruit die cuts that are included with this stamp set. This is going to help this card really come together, and this is where the bulk of my images will be coming from. I do love that there is such a wide variety of images included. Next, I'll be using the You're So Sweet stamp set and coordinating die set. The stamp set comes with the sentiment of You're So Sweet, along with some littler sentiments that you're able to use in conjunction with the larger sentiment. You could also stamp out a lot of the images as well if you didn't want to die cut and ink blend like I'll be doing. I'm also going to go ahead and grab some smooth vellum. This is by scrapbook.com. I am going to be die cutting my cellophane handled bag out of the vellum. This is going to give a really fun see-through component to my card. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but here you're seeing how you get almost a frosted look behind the vellum, and I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks how to make sure that your card will be perfect when you use the vellum product. I'm going to go ahead and trim this down to about an A2 size panel just because that'll make it easy for die cutting. I'm going to take my extra and I'm going to put it back in the packet so I can use it later. I'm reaching back for the market bag shape die set, so I'm going to pull it out of the packaging and take out the handled bag, and this is the image, like I said, that I'm going to be using on top of that smooth vellum. Using some 1-inch mint tape that I do have in my mint tape dispenser, I'm going to tack down my die to the vellum, and then I'm going to grab some Sunshine Smooth cardstock as well. I'm going to grab the lime green paper. I'm also going to grab the yellow paper. We're going to take a sheet of the darker orange paper, and finally a page of the pink paper as well. These panels give off those citrus sort of fruit vibes that I'm looking to go for, and I'm going to finish off by grabbing one sheet from the A2 mixed media paper pad in white. Bringing out the market bags die set, I'm going to start placing out the different dies that I want to use. So I'm using some of the watermelon inner pieces, and I'm going to die cut that from the pink cardstock. What you're going to see me do though is I'm going to tack it into place with some more mint tape, and then I'm going to bring out some scissors and I am going to trim it down. This is going to help cut down the amount of space I'll be using on my cutting plates for my die cutting machine, and it'll allow me to make less passes to get all of my images cut out. After I'm done with my pink sunshine paper, I'm going to tack down some more watermelon pieces to the white mixed media cardstock, followed by some of the orange die cuts to the orange sunshine cardstock, still trimming that down so I can save on that real estate on my cutting plate panel. I'm going to go ahead and tack down some of the lemon on the yellow paper and cut that down to size, and then I will finish it off. The green is actually going to get quite a bit of use because the green is going to utilize some of the rind pieces from the watermelon, and it's also going to use some of the leafier bits that are included as dyes as well. So I'm going to play with some different inks that I'll be able to ink these up and transform these into the images that I need them to be, but we're really putting almost this entire die set to work. We're using almost everything except the paper bag die to make this card come together. I am going to trim off the portion that I'm using of my lime green cardstock, and then we are going to process as much as we possibly can on our die cutting machine. After all of my images are all die cut out, I do have one of these stack and sort organizing trays that I'm going to pop all of my die cut pieces into. I also have the scrapbook.com's pick tool that I can pop the die cuts out of their metal frame and into the tray. I'm going to grab the Market Bloom pattern paper collection. This is in the A2 size, and I am going to grab this striped pattern to use almost as a wallpaper for our project because this is a little bit of a scene card. The next pad of paper that I'm going to go ahead and pull in is the Daybreak Smooth cardstock. I'm going to grab some of this light tan paper to use for the project as well, and that is going to serve as a tabletop that will transform with a little bit of ink blending. After we've got our papers ready to go, I'm grabbing a 5" by 6" paper inking palette by Picket Fence Studios. This is a nice grip mat that I can use to do some fun ink blending techniques for my project. So I'm going to go ahead, put it into place on my mat, and then remove the top acetate. I've really been utilizing these mats quite a bit when it comes to ink blending smaller die cut pieces because it does help hold it in place. So I'm going to start lining up my die cut images. I'm keeping all of the same colored images together. So we've got all of our pink Sunshine Smooth cardstock watermelon bits together, and I'm putting those all nicely into place. Then I'm going to put some of the oranges into place as well, and this is going to really streamline my ink blending. So I'm going in first. This is lumberjack plaid, and I'm making sure all of my pieces are nicely into place, and I'm using a mini foam blender so I can go ahead and get this lumberjack plaid distressing onto my die cut fruit bits. Next, I will use some crackling campfire onto my orange pieces just to distress those edges, make sure I'm getting a nice smooth blend. Then once completed, I will remove those as well. Off camera, I clean my paper inking palette, and then I start lining up my other pieces. Now we're going to focus on the lime green watermelon rind and the yellow lemons. So I will pull in some Lucky Clover distressing for the watermelon. I really have been leaning into using a lot of the Lucky Clover color lately. I just love that it's a nice bluer green than what I typically reach for. So we're going to use that for the watermelon, and then for the lemon, we're going to distress and ink blend with some mustard seed. After I have all of my lemons into place, I will remove them from my palette, and then I can move on to my little leafier bits. This is when I start to play a little bit more with the green colors of ink and how they play on this lime Sunshine Smooth cardstock. So for this, I am going to go use some Mowed Lawn Distress ink, which is typically my go-to. It's really good for sort of those natural leafier grassy colors, as the name would lend itself to. And I'm using a mini blending brush from Waffle Flower in order to get into those little itty bitty places. I love how this ends up looking. It creates a really dark contrast and blend on the images, but it still turns out pretty smooth because that brush is rather delicate. I'll go ahead, I'll remove all of those leafy bits from my paper inking palette. It did a great job holding them into place, and I'll be able to wipe it clean. Let's work on that tabletop I talked about earlier. So we're going to take that Daybreak cardstock and distress the bottom with some Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. I like using oxides when I want to ink blend a larger area because they blend more smoothly. And I'm going to blend it on top of that tan cardstock, and then I'm going to water it down and splatter to get a fun effect. Afterwards, we're going to work on our background, and I'm using the new white luster brush markers, and these work kind of like the glitter brush markers, but not. They splatter a opaque sort of color onto your project. This is going to obviously be white. I'm going to splatter that onto the card. When it hits your paper, it might not be entirely opaque. I was concerned at first, but then I realized it's just the way that the product works. So after you splatter it, give it a little bit of time to dry, or as I'm about to do, you can pull in a heat tool to help put it into place and get it nice and dry. And you'll see how it's going to get that opaque finish that's described. Using some gold watercolor paper splatter by Picket Fence Studio, I'm going to water that down and splatter that on top of that white luster marker splatter to give a little bit of a metallic pop to our panel. Just like before, I will use a heat blending tool to go ahead and get this set nicely into place so that I don't have to worry about any sort of smudging in the future. I'm going to trim down my tabletop panel, and I always recommend when trimming things down a little bit to fit on your card, go bigger rather than smaller because you can always trim it down to size. I am also going to take my background piece and trim it to about 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, so this way when I put it onto a white A2 card base, it'll have a nice frame. I adhere my tabletop piece to my panel. I do have a little bit of excess on the side that I just trim off so that it's nice and snug to my panel, and I will adhere my background to an A2 sized white card base. Like I said, this is going to give me a nice little white frame around it, which I just think is a wonderful finishing touch. I pull out my Misty so I can work on stamping out my sentiment. You're going to see me pull in this piece of orange paper, and I end up not using it, and I end up switching it out for some white cardstock. But my original thought was to use this white panel. It didn't work as nicely because I didn't let the ink dry, and then I figured that the white would pop more. I'm going to go and grab the You're So Sweet sentiment from the You're So Sweet stamp set. I'm also going to grab the thank you sentiment, the mini sentiment that's included with the stamp set as well. And I switch to that white mixed media paper. I brush it with an anti-static brush, and then I'm going to stamp my sentiments in some black, not well, it's Nocturne VersaFine Clair ink, which is a wonderful pigment ink that I will set into place using Detail Clear embossing powder, also by Pink and Main. So I'm going to pour that on top of my sentiment, use a piece of scrap paper to catch it, put it back into its bottle, and then I will grab my heat tool to start getting that sentiment put into place. You're going to see how it's going to start to change, like when you are using your heat embossing tools, and that just means that my sentiment is going to be ready to go very shortly. Grabbing the You're So Sweet shape coordinating dies, I am going to die cut out my You're So Sweet sentiment, and then I'm also going to die cut out the thank you sentiment as well, and these will give some nice clean cuts to put onto my project. The next portion of my card making is I'm going to be assembling all of my little fruit pieces. Now I'm just going to kind of give an overview of how I handled this, and I used my Misty Precision Glue Press in combination with a pair of tweezers, and another thing that's very important is clean fingers. I know that's hard to come across when we're crafting, but I did find that when putting these little pieces together, I had to use my fingers quite a bit. So I'm just kind of pushing everything into place. I know this is quite sped up. I'm just trying to save you from having me to adhere every little itty bitty piece together. But I'm putting my watermelon bits together. I'm also adhering some of the leafy bits to my oranges and to my lemons. I'm really digging right now how wonderful this all looks with all of the ink blending that we did earlier in this video. So when I have everything together and ink blended, I start placing out where I want everything to go. And I'm strategically placing things behind where my cellophane bag is going to go because I can't adhere them directly to that vellum bag. If you adhere something directly to vellum, it's going to give you this weird smushy wet effect that you cannot reverse. So you've got to very creatively use your vellum to make sure that you're hiding any sort of those smushed adhesive bits. You will see anything of mine that goes on top of that vellum bag is going to be used as a way to disguise the adhesive smushed portions that will be underneath. So that's why I'm adhering some sequins and some fruit bits on top of that die cut, because that is going to help me hide the glue that holds it into place. So here you see that I'm very carefully putting a little bit of glue behind areas that I know I can hide, and then I'm going to adhere my bag directly on top of that fruit. It gives the illusion that the fruit is stacked inside of that bag. And then what I'm also going to do is remove the backing from my fruit sentiment and place that into place to cover one of the last adhesive smushed areas on that vellum. That You're So Sweet sentiment covers up that one adhesive dot very nicely, and I'm also able to use some of that foam tape behind the thank you addition sentiment to put underneath the You're So Sweet. I just think this card is absolutely adorable, and it's kind of wild that we're not even done yet. We've still got a little bit more to add with more fruit pieces and embellishments. So using the same sort of procedure as before, we're going to adhere some of the fruit together, and I'm also going to play with dimension and use foam tape to get those fruit pieces to really pop on the project. So I'm putting more of them into place, kind of making them seem like they're outside of the bag on the countertop or tabletop, whatever we'd like to call it. And after I have all of those fruit pieces ready to go, I do decide to go in and add some iridescent moonshine sequins from Picket Fence Studio as well. You're going to see I have one last bit that I would like to adhere onto the strap of my bag, so I put a sequin and then a little bit of adhesive behind it, and it holds it nicely into place. And there you have it. Our card is fully complete. I think that this thank you card is just the sweetest little thing, and I know whoever you send it to is going to absolutely love being on the receiving end of this card. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiration. You can also follow me on Instagram at JustinOte by Justin. And until next time, friends, stay crafty. Thank you so much again for stopping by. Goodbye.